He said it with a smile. That was the part I couldn't get past for weeks afterward. Not the words themselves, but the ease with which he let them leave his mouth, in front of his mother, in front of our realtor, in the kitchen of the house I had personally negotiated, inspected, and arranged the financing for. My name is Raven. I'm 37 years old, and the morning my husband told me I wasn't on the deed to our own home was the morning I stopped being a wife and started being something far more dangerous. A woman who finally understood exactly what she was dealing with. 6 weeks before that morning, on a Thursday in early November, Marcus had handed me a glass of wine, kissed my temple, and told me I deserved a break. We'd been house hunting for nearly 8 months by then. I was the one who'd been driving us out on weekends, the one who'd built the spreadsheet tracking 42 properties, the one who had spoken directly to the mortgage broker and secured pre-approval on our combined income. When we finally found the house, 4 bedrooms, a quarter-mile from the elementary school, with the kind of light in the kitchen that made you want to stay forever, I was the one who'd wept in the car afterward. Marcus had patted my knee and said, "Let me handle the paperwork. You've done enough." I thought it was a kindness. I cannot tell you how many times I've revisited that sentence since. What Marcus and his mother, Constance, didn't know was that I'd already spoken to a real estate attorney 3 days before that kitchen conversation. And what I had in my bag that morning, tucked beneath my work portfolio in a manila envelope, was a certified copy of the deed, a completed lis pendens filing, and a letter from that attorney that would make every single thing they believed about their arrangement feel like sand shifting under their feet. But before I tell you how that morning ended, you need to come back with me to where this really started, to a woman named Grandma Adele, and a lesson she gave me in a sunlit dining room when I was 9 years old that I didn't fully understand for another 28 years. Before I continue, if this story is already starting to feel familiar to you, take a moment to subscribe, but only if you genuinely feel something. And drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love knowing who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, in a house that smelled like cedar and old books and, on Sunday mornings, the particular sweetness of my grandmother's cardamom coffee. Grandma Adele was my mother's mother, a retired paralegal who had spent 31 years in family law before her knees gave out, and she moved in with us. She was 72 when I was 9, small and sharp-eyed, with a way of watching people that made them feel both seen and slightly nervous. I used to climb into the chair across from her while she read the morning paper, and she'd look up at me over her glasses and say, "What did you notice today, Raven?" It was her daily question. She wasn't asking about feelings. She was asking about facts. My mother, Diane, was warm and well-meaning and completely unable to advocate for herself. She worked as a dental hygienist and poured everything she had into our household while my father, Gerald, made most of the structural decisions about money, property, and the future. He wasn't cruel. He was simply a man who believed, without examining the belief, that his name on every important document was the natural order of things. I watched my mother defer to him on the house, on the car, on the joint account that was only legally accessible to her after considerable inconvenience. I watched this for 18 years, I noticed. Grandma Adele saw me noticing. It was on a Tuesday in March. I was 16, and my parents had just had a quiet, tight-lipped argument about something related to the house refinancing, that Grandma Adele sat me down at the dining room table and put a single piece of paper in front of me. It was a property deed. Not our house. A small house she had purchased herself in 1974, before she was married, that still had her name on it. Just her name. "Raven," she said, and her voice was the kind of calm you earn rather than inherit. "A document with your name on it is not a trophy. It is a position. Do you understand the difference?" I told her I thought so. She shook her head slightly and said, "You will." I didn't understand what she meant that day. not for another 19 years. I met Marcus Cole at a finance industry conference in Chicago when I was 29. I was 3 years into my career as a forensic accountant, and he was charming in the specific way that competent men often are: effortlessly confident, good at listening when it served him, and genuinely funny in a way that made you forgive small things you probably shouldn't have. We dated for 2 years, got engaged, married in September, and spent our first 3 years in a rented apartment in Philadelphia while we saved. I was earning $118,000 a year by then. Marcus was earning slightly less, doing commercial real estate consulting. When we decided to buy a house, I was the one who ran the numbers. I was the one who knew our debt-to-income ratio by heart, who'd read the HUD guidelines, who'd negotiated our rate down from 7.1% to 6.6% over 2 phone calls. His mother, Constance, had been a low-level friction in our marriage from the beginning. Not dramatically, she was too smart for that. She operated in suggestions. Marcus has always been the planner in the family. Raven, you work so hard. It must be nice to have Marcus managing the big decisions. Small words, consistent pressure, a slow and patient remapping of what our marriage looked like from the outside. Marcus, to his discredit, let it happen. I watched it with the same quiet attention my grandmother had taught me. I noticed. I didn't react. Not yet. The first time I understood the full shape of what was happening was on October 31st at 6:47 p.m., when I logged into our joint financial portal to confirm the wire transfer for the earnest money deposit on the house, and found that the account had been restructured 2 weeks earlier. Marcus had been listed as the sole authorized initiator of outgoing transfers above $5,000. My access had been reclassified as view only. I sat very still at my desk for 44 seconds. Then I picked up my phone and called our attorney. I didn't say anything to Marcus that night. I made dinner. I asked about his day. I counted the seconds between his words and my words, feeling the new geometry of the situation settling around me. I made a decision. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who was supposed to be your partner, the person who signed next to you on a document that said, "In sickness and in health," type the word "deed" in the comments. I read every single one. Over the following 11 days, I did 5 things. I consulted with a family law attorney named Claire Mercer, whom a colleague had recommended. I pulled every financial document from the past 4 years that bore both our names, and discovered that Marcus had already had preliminary conversations with a title company about putting the new property in his name alone, with a spousal waiver document that, if signed, would have released my legal interest. I contacted the mortgage lender and confirmed that my income was the primary qualifying factor on our approval. Without my $118,000, we would not have been approved at the purchase price. I had Claire file a lis pendens on the property, and I called the title company and calmly, without raising my voice, informed them that any transaction proceeding without my written consent and legal representation would result in immediate litigation. The morning of November 14th was a Wednesday. The light was thin and cold, the kind of gray November morning that feels like the world is holding its breath. Constance had come for breakfast. She lived 23 miles away in Wilmington, but she'd made the drive, which in retrospect tells you everything about what she and Marcus believed was going to happen that day. The realtor, a pleasant woman named Joanna, was sitting at our kitchen table with a folder. There was a document in front of my chair. I could see from the doorway that it was the spousal waiver. I set my bag down on the counter. I poured myself a coffee. The kitchen smelled like butter and burnt toast, and something metallic underneath, the way a room smells when tension has been sitting in it for too long. I turned around and looked at Marcus. He looked back at me with the particular expression of a man who believes he has already won. Easy, almost sorry for you, like he was about to deliver disappointing news with as much grace as possible. "Raven," he said, and he gestured to the chair in front of the waiver. "We need to talk about the deed. The way the title is structured, for tax reasons and just for simplicity going forward, It's cleaner if it's in my name. You understand. You're not on the deed. He paused. I was going to tell you. Constance folded her hands on the table. Joanna looked at her folder. I need to pause here for 1 second. If you can feel what I was feeling in that moment, that specific, almost crystalline calm that arrives when you stop hoping and start knowing, type I understand in the comments. I sat down. I placed my coffee mug carefully to my left. Then I reached into my bag and set the manila envelope on the table. You're right, I said. I'm not on the deed. Not yet. I opened the envelope. But I am in the court filing. I watched the color leave Marcus's face in stages, the way a tide goes out, gradually and then all at once. Constance's hands unfolded. Joanna stopped looking at her folder. I placed the first document on the table. It was the lis pendens, filed 4 days earlier, which formally declared my legal interest in the property and legally prevented any title transfer without my participation. I placed the second document beside it, a letter from Claire Mercer laying out my financial contribution to the purchase, the mortgage pre-approval documentation, and a formal notice that any attempt to complete a unilateral title transfer would constitute marital waste and be addressed in court. I placed the third document on top, a printout of the portal modification, time-stamped, showing the date my transfer access had been quietly removed. You moved me to view only on October 17th, I said. I noticed on October 31st. I called an attorney on November 1st. I smoothed the papers with 2 fingers. The lis pendens was filed November 10th. You can ask Joanna. She would have seen it in her title search yesterday, if she'd run one. Did you run one, Joanna? Joanna's face told me everything. She hadn't been told to. Constance said, Raven, you're being dramatic. I'm being accurate, I said. I looked at her the way my grandmother had once looked at people, not unkindly, but without yielding anything. There's a difference. Marcus stood up, sat down again. His hands were flat on the table. You can't just... I already did, I said. And because my income is the primary qualifying factor on the approval, the lender has been notified that any title arrangement excluding me will trigger a review of the loan terms. That's in the 4th document. I had not brought a 4th document, but he didn't know that. He didn't reach for the papers to check. The silence that followed lasted for 41 seconds. I know because I counted them. Joanna began quietly gathering her folder. Constance looked at her son. Marcus looked at the table. And I thought of Grandma Adele, sitting across from me at the dining room table 21 years earlier. A deed in front of her with only her name on it. A document with your name on it is not a trophy, she had said. It is a position. I finally understood what she meant. In the weeks that followed, the consequences arrived in the quiet, methodical way that real consequences always do, not with drama, but with weight. Marcus and I retained separate attorneys. The house was titled in both names, as it should have been from the start, and the financial account was restructured with equal access restored. Constance stopped making the 23-mile drive. Several people in Marcus's family, who had apparently been briefed on a version of events in which I was the unreasonable party, went very quiet when they learned the actual timeline. Marcus's sister, Lauren, called me 6 weeks later. She was the one person in his family who had always been straightforward with me, and she called on a Sunday afternoon when I was sitting by the window with tea. I'm sorry, she said. I had no idea it had gone that far. I told her I appreciated the call. I didn't ask her to take sides. That wasn't what I needed from anyone anymore. Our marriage did not survive the year. I am at peace with that. Some fractures reveal, upon close inspection, that the structure was never sound to begin with. What I am left with is the house, my name on the deed, as it should be, and an understanding of myself that I earned the hard way and intend to keep. There is a morning I still think about. It was a Tuesday in February, about 3 months after everything had resolved itself legally. I was sitting in that kitchen, the one with the light I had loved from the first viewing, and the sun was coming in low and golden the way it does in winter, pooling on the hardwood floors. My friend Margot had come over, and we were drinking coffee and not talking about anything important, just sitting. Just existing in a space that had my name on it, legally and permanently, in the place it had always belonged. I thought about my mother, Diane, who had spent 30 years deferring on every document that mattered. I thought about my grandmother, who had known the difference between a trophy and a position. I thought about the 9-year-old girl who had sat across from her at the dining room table and only half understood. What I learned, what I want to leave you with, is not that you should be suspicious of the people who love you. It's that love is not a substitute for clarity. A relationship is not diminished by both names on a document. If someone tells you it is, if someone insists that your absence from something is for your own good, for simplicity, for tax reasons, for any reason at all, that is not a kindness. That is a position being taken, and you have every right to take yours first. If this story moved you today, tell me in the comments. Have you ever been quietly removed from something that was rightfully yours? I want to know. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone in the middle of a decision they're being pressured to hand over, please share this with them. That's why I tell these stories. If you're new here, subscribe. There is another story waiting for you in the description, and I think it will stay with you. Thank you for being here, all the way to the end. I'll see you very soon.